So some of the things that you mentioned, the word nest, just I loved how you presented that as a really interesting visual, and
Mhm.
and that you can see I wrote that down.
Yeah.
Um, so what I'm going to do is explain a little bit about what you're looking at here before I actually start doing any kind of thumbnails. And then while I start doing thumbnails, I believe we have some people waiting to say something to us. So let us get to this, and then we'll if you have any questions or just any comments, we'll answer them. So what I have here is essentially a thumbnail layout, and they're really small purposely because I want to be able to get really quick, energized impressions of what I was reading. It's not meant to look pretty. It's meant for me as like a guide or a map. I'm going to put like the amount of panels on each of the uh, thumbnails so that I can get an idea of like how it's going to pace out. When I mean by pace, I mean like the time it's going to take for the character to go through that particular page. And the other reason I have this at such a small size is that I can see all those pages together to see how they flow. So I look at them both individually as well as a unit. And it's important when you're telling a story that you have, as I had said before, a pacing to the story so that if you need something to be really fast, you can figure out whether you have one or two panels on that page and a little dialogue, or if you want somebody to slow down in their reading, you may have a lot of panels or a lot of dialogue. And those things help guide you to actually control the way the reader is taking in the story, right?
Mhm.
So you're basically you're taking them. I always think of like a roller coaster, and you're building up that suspense as the roller coaster slowly goes up. And then right at the top there, when it's about to get really, really scary, you know something's going to happen. It goes down, right? And so then all of a sudden you're in for this really fun ride. And that's kind of like what I think about when I'm thinking about how I'm flowing the pages. And you can see here that I numbered them. And the way that a comic book or any book really generally starts is when you first open up the book, you're going to have interior cover and then page one on the opposite side. And that, so if I were to flip it on this side, the interior cover, page one, I think that, or I maybe reverse that, but either way, you're only seeing that one page of whatever the story is going to be. And then the next page, when you open it up, is going to be, it's actually two pages. You're going to have two and three. And then the next set of pages, four and five. And I think we've mentioned this before. If when you turn a page, you want to leave like kind of like some kind of cliffhanger on that
Mhm.
panel prior to that page that you're going to turn to, and it could be a very very minor thing, but you're doing it in a way so that the person reading it wants to turn the page, right? So now you have, if there's some kind of big reveal on page two, right? You're going to plant some kind of seed on page one, that last panel, and as they open, they're going to be like, "Whoa!" Right? And then three, they're going to see it right away. So it's not going to be a big reveal. You wouldn't put a big reveal necessarily on that other side
Mhm.
because they're going to be able to see it right away. It's going to be deflated a bit by whatever's happening on page two. Right. So, and then, again, you go back to page three, you're going to have last panel, another, little cliffhanger, and then that reveal on page four. So that's one of those things you want to keep in mind. And there's a reason why I number it that way. So I could also see how it's going to print out, especially if you're going to have, let's say, a double page spread. You want to make sure that they coincide with the proper page spread that you're going to be working on, right? You don't want to have a spread that's between three and four because that's not going to work, right? So you want to lay, this is again, as I said, it's like a map of how you're going to be um, seeing the story in a really small, quick way. And all of this really shouldn't take a long time. So I've got about 10 or 11 minutes I think I'm going to try to do at least the first three thumbnails. And as you're going to see, they're going to be quick. You may not exactly understand what I'm drawing, but I'm going to um, lay out the amount of panels that are going to be on each page. A couple of things that I'm thinking about while I'm doing this, which is where is the dialogue going to go? right?
Mhm,
I
mhm,
always think about that, so I have to make sure that there's room for whatever kind of dialogue is gonna be there. Usually, you want it above the person's head or, in a place where it's kind of, like, behind them a little bit. So I may even, like, as I'm going back to panel 1, there's really no dialogue here. There's a little dialogue right here. There's a little dialogue right here. So far, there's not a lot of,
mhm,
uh, places where I need to make sure there's empty space where the art isn't any important art isn't being covered. And then you've got dialogue above the person, and again, there's the door has to be blocked in there somewhere. Um, and then, something similar with this panel 5, with the door behind them, and then panel 6, um, where it may silhouette the person, we can see the door, and that's just an instinctive thing.
mhm,
So, one other thing, which is when I'm doing these, I try to this is something I learned from one of my mentors when I was back in school. Ty Templeton, if anybody knows, is a very well-known comic book writer and illustrator, creator. He's worked on Batman and a bunch of Marvel and
mhm,
all different comics, and he's a teacher as well. And so I took some classes with him, and he taught us about when you're doing a page, you should always have an establishing shot, an action shot, and a close-up. Right, and that's
mhm,
just so that you're hitting certain kinds of, um, beats, you're getting certain kinds of emotion and excitement from the page, you're giving certain kinds of information, and it's not a rule you have to follow with every page, but that's something I generally try to think of. I wanna have, like, a variety
mhm,
when I'm working on a page, so I always think, "Okay, you're working into a room, you kinda need to see what's in the room, so you're gonna zoom out, right? But then if you have some action, somebody's holding a box, you may wanna close in on that a bit. Same thing with opening the door, right? But when they're on the phone, which isn't really super exciting, you can close up get a
mhm,
close up of that person, see their reaction, their facial expression, get a feel for the emotion they're feeling. And then back to panel 6 where they're moving boxes again, I can zoom out. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about as I'm going from, panel to panel on this page, and I'm gonna move on to page 2.
wanted to actually mention something about dialogue, since Keith brought it up, because that's one of the things that, you know, there is dialogue in this, but it's very minimal. So it's important to sort of decide as well, like how visually the dialogue's going to look, because it's very different to someone actually speaking it. So how it's going to fit in, where, and if the action can do it without the dialogue, take the dialogue out, right? We want the action to be able to do enough of the things, and then the dialogue sort of fills in where necessary.